Now we have a very special return of Mr. Billy Harfosh, who we had heard from earlier today. And Billy, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Rob.
Well, I'm grateful that you're here. And we had talked about the you had introduced us a little bit about a recent loss in your life. Your brother,
Yeah.
AJ. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
AJ was my younger brother, and he was the brains of the family. he could he could fix anything. He could do anything. He was a really smart guy, a very successful guy. He's a beautiful wife and a beautiful baby, McKinley. And yeah, he was a special man that we lost way too soon. And unfortunately, Rob, that's a story of a lot of families. That's life. It's a very, very difficult reality to live with. But that's why conversations like this are essential.
Yeah, and what really surprised me was sort of the recency. Right, this was about 5 months ago,
Yeah.
and you explained it was a cancer.
Yes, it was. And, without getting into details, everything just sort of went downhill really fast. He was diagnosed with lymphoma and then in the hospital. And then, we can treat it with the chemo and everything. And then things just snowballed and it just went downhill. And what's been difficult for me is, because you've been through this, you go through these stages, different stages of grief. And I'm a pretty sensitive guy, but I used to think I knew what that word meant. I really didn't, Rob. I mean, that's the truth. And it was like, the shock and the almost like you wake up in the morning and you forget. And then it's like, oh my gosh, this is real. Like AJ's not here anymore. And I think a lot of our viewers today probably understand this, that have been through it. And it's the shock. And I had a conversation actually with Patty on the phone a couple of months ago, Patty with Eric's house. And she said, Billy, I'm going to be straight with you. It doesn't get easier. And Patty was right, because now we're almost at right around 5 months, and it doesn't get easier. As the shock wears off, the reality sets in. And it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing.
Yeah, and you are here speaking about it, which is pretty incredible. What's giving you the strength to talk about it? Because I've obviously worked with a lot of people, and my experience when my brother passed away was to not talk about it.
Yeah.
At 5 months, I was consuming alcohol heavily to deal with it. I was numbing the pain away. I certainly wasn't talking about it. And so I'm curious about, your experience. Why do you feel okay talking? Do you feel okay talking? What's going on in your head that you're here
I'll give you two things.
sharing this?
Number one, first and foremost, my sister-in-law, her name is Shannon Harfosh. She's a warrior. And, we were with her as we went through this. And she has become the strength of the family, and she's a mother. She's a new mother. And she is just a rock. So when I look at what she's been through and the way that she's dealing with it and her ability to speak out and help others already, it's just like, well, Billy, you have to do this. It's just something you have to do. And I mentioned to you off the air, it's a little bit selfish because I'm at the point now where it's inside anyways. I'm thinking about it anyways. So why not get it out? I find myself, I was at a local grocery store, Sprouts, plug for Sprouts the other day, and I'm sampling some teas and nuts and blueberries, and started talking to this wonderful older lady, and it's like, oh, and by the way, I find myself going into the story, and I don't even realize I'm doing it. It's because I need to get it out. So it's somewhat selfish. And the third thing is because when I hear people speak out about their loss and how they deal with it, it in turn helps me.
Yeah.
So if I can just be a little sliver of hope to someone that's listening, then I think that makes it all worth it.
It's beautiful. And I think that's amazingly, it's amazing how quickly you've gotten there, which is great. And the fact that you've got support to help you find that space is great. It took me, a lot longer to reach that space, but I can echo that. I want to support that once I was able to work through some of the other bad coping mechanisms, drinking or whatever it is I was doing, and there was a lot of it, there was some peace that I would find by sort of putting myself in AA, we call it the middle position, where I'm sort of in the center. You have a sponsor who's sort of behind you that you're helping, and you have somebody who's The sponsor is the person who's helping you. Your sponsee is the person that you're helping. And so you're sort of in this middle position. And that gives you that real strong fortification. It sounds like you were able to find some of that with your family. But, I want to get a little bit raw, a little bit, if we can, just sort of dig into it, because this was something that was on my mind. I feel like I have a lot of support. I feel like I've got my men's group, my family, Eric's house, and all of these things, but there's still something that's missing as a sibling, and I don't know, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your family, how many, do you have other siblings, or
Yeah.
what was the family dynamic? Because the whole family changes, and you may have all the support in the world, but the holidays are different. Everything is different.
Well, we're about to go through that. I guess the next one would be Thanksgiving. He was my only sibling, my only brother, and there's a little bit of having to step up, I guess you would say. I have, I have incredible parents, incredible family, but there's also this sense of the need to step up and to always kind of be there, whether that be emotionally or physically present, because that other half is gone now. There's a sense of responsibility to step up for my niece and my sister-in-law. But if I'm being honest, and you said raw, and if we're going to go
Yeah,
deep on this,
sure.
there's also a word we didn't bring up, and that's anger. And so I'm angry. You mentioned the substance abuse. For me, it hasn't been that so much that, more so about questioning everything, and that question of why, and questioning your faith, and questioning, well, if there is a God, then why the heck would he or she have done this? Why would they have taken somebody so young, 35 years old, that did everything right? I haven't done everything right like my brother did.
Right.
Why was I a jerk to my brother when we were younger? I wish I could take that back. So there's all of these constant questions around why this happened. Then all of a sudden you start questioning everything in your life. Like, what does it even matter? That's where you have to be careful. And that's where these conversations are important, because people get into substance abuse, and then mental health problems, and then things just start going down the wrong road. So whatever we can do, Rob, and maybe we'll do more of this in the future, more conversations like this, to let people know that there is still that purpose. We might not have all the answers as to why our loved ones are gone, but there's a reason that we're still here, and we still have a duty on this earth to support others.
Right. Yeah. And it can go both directions, and I've definitely seen it. I know you've been working with Eric's house for years now, and I know you've seen it, but there's a pretty precarious position that families will find themselves in when they lose somebody suddenly. And it's like this little bomb goes off, and, especially with suicides and other deaths, people they call it clusters, right? Where one death will spread essentially into other deaths. And, the depression, the loss is so catastrophic for a family that it doesn't end, it just sort of spreads across generations. And so, the work that you're doing, and the ability for you to speak out so that other people can hear this and deviate themselves from that potential course is very powerful. And I got to tell you, it's pretty amazing that you're willing to be open, so open so quickly about all of this.
I think what makes it difficult, and I don't know how we're doing on time, but one thing I did want to share is, I'm not sure if you've experienced this in your life, in your family's life, but there's this dark cloud, and this dark cloud doesn't seem to go away. I mean, there's moments of happiness, there's moments of watching the Cardinals win, there's good things in your career, there's money, there's all these things that happen, but they're temporary, and death is final. And as a smart person, talking about you, trying to be humble here, but
that's very nice.
As a smart guy, maybe you understand this sense of, there's no way out of this one. If you have a business problem, or a problem with your friend or in your relationship, there's ways to talk about it. There's things to do. There's support. There's no bringing back our siblings.
Right.
That's the toughest part.
It is tough. And you mentioned the word anger, and I know, I don't know if I'm supposed to say it, but I still have some anger about my situation. It's still something that I think lingers there, and I'm wondering if you have any of that at all. But with Eric and mine, Eric died by suicide. And so there's this feeling as a brother that he sort of abandoned me, that he's left me behind. I have a middle sibling, Joey, who has Down syndrome. My mother has, breast cancer and all sorts of stuff. And it's like my brother abandoned me by making that decision was my initial instinct, right? And then, of course, through my healing and grieving process, I've sort of learned more about what he was going through. I've had my own issues with addiction and recovery, but I can still sort of tap into that anger. I can still sort of feel it lurking back over there, and I'm very cognizant of it, about it. And you mentioned in your interview with Barbara, sort of about the daily, practice and sort of, connecting with the recovery process, with the grieving and healing process. Do you feel any of those angers? I know it was sort of it wasn't a suicide, but there's external, very God, your faith.
And it happened fast.
And it happened fast.
I'm gonna introduce another word to this conversation. And this is the toughest one: blame, and finger pointing. Now your situation is much different than mine, but there's like, okay, who do we blame for this? And it goes down to actually like real humans, like the medical community, this doctor, that doctor.
Yeah.
He's playing golf all the time. Was there some sort of fertilizer on the thing growing up? Uncle Google, you're constantly Googling stuff. You're trying to figure out there needs to be somebody to blame. And I think that's part of our culture, right? In America, we want to sue, we want to blame. And no, I'm not over that yet, because it doesn't make sense. Now, not to turn the tables, but I guess that's what I do in my job. It's like with you, it's like a movie. You probably relive moments that you had with your sibling and said, what could have I said? What could have I done different to stop this? So it didn't happen. So that's like a whole nother level of blame that I'm sure you're dealing with.
It is, and it's missing the future that you could have had together, right? So with my brother, we used to send songs to each other. A song would pop up. I'd say, hey, this song is a banger. You have to listen to this. I'd send that over to him. But, that was like the little daily thing, and I missed those for a long time, and I still do miss those, and I still think about home when those moments pop up. But when you sort of, think about and venture into the future, my brother was supposed to be somebody who spent time with my kids, right, if I were to have kids, or supposed to help me care for my mom, or we were supposed to do all of these things together. And even as a child, I was planning on that. I was sort of planning on him being those things, and then suddenly that's sort of stripped out from you. And so it's your future changes as well. And in this case, my brother was young. He didn't have a family. He didn't have a wife. He didn't have kids. But, your brother, he's leaving a little bit more behind. And
right.
And your family now has to grapple with that.
Yeah, there's two things. The first thing is we can shift from blame and anger and that dark cloud that we were talking about to honor. And that's what I'm trying to do. And to be honest with you, I'm not in therapy or anything, and maybe I should be. Maybe I should spend some more time down here at Eric's house and talk to people in the know. But switch to honoring that person's life. Switch to honoring that loved one's life, so you can lead your life in such a way that they would be proud. And the other thing, Rob, is there's a gift, I think, that our brothers have left behind. And for me, it was sort of like a slap in the face of reality. And I always said this thing in all my writings and after my show, and it's just like this cheesy phrase, like, you only have one life to live. And I didn't know what that really meant, just like grief. I didn't know what one life really meant until I lost my brother. So that's another gift he's given me. Like, this is it, man. This is it.
Has it forced you or encouraged or accelerated your thoughts about your own mortality or death and that next stage?
That's a weird one, right? I mean, we could go for hours here. Yeah, that's a weird one.
Yeah.
Because when it happens to somebody so close, it becomes real.
Yeah.
You hear about a celebrity dying, or older grandparents and they're 95 and they pass, and it's terrible. But when it's somebody that's younger and it's somebody that's so close that you talk to on the phone every day, that you spent Christmas with, the whole thing, then it becomes real. And then you're like, oh, that's going to happen to me too. And guess what? Every one of us here, it's going to happen to. And everyone watching, sorry to be the messenger here of bad news, but we're all leaving this earth at one time or another. So what do we do with that? What do we do with it?
Yeah, and I think the message that you were starting with, about serving other people and about sort of passing that message along is critical in order to find that healing. We have about 2 minutes left. Can you tell me a little bit more about maybe your future plans, or how are you going to continue to your family heal? And
Yeah,
you've got the holidays coming up, and you're not alone. There are a lot of other people who are just emerging on this journey, and there's a tough time coming in the next couple months.
The truth is,
have you
Rob,
thought about it?
Yeah, the truth is, I don't know, and that's scary. As in, lives in the unknown, and that's scary. I'm nervous for my mom, especially during the holidays. And another thing, probably we should get together and talk about is when we talk about honoring somebody. How do you do that? Like we had this idea with those, remember those like Live Strong bands?
Yeah.
Do we make a band and have some kind of like AJ remembrance thing? Like, how do you actually make sure that there's a in my home, there's a flower that was on my brother's casket. We all had flowers, and I brought it, he's in New York, and brought it back to Arizona, and it's like a dried flower now. It's like, how do we make a memorial? What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And that's just, the truth is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Time will tell, but that's the reality. There's no easy way out of this thing. There's just not.
Right. And an important takeaway that I think you mentioned earlier was, maybe you mentioned this off the air, but a lot of this stuff people don't want to push through, right? When you lose somebody, when you're suffering a loss, when you're feeling hurtful and hurt and depressed and down, I don't know about you, but my last thing I wanted to do was go jump into a big community and connect with a bunch of people. But when I did, you find out how much better you feel afterwards and how much love and support you have. It's almost like going to the gym, right? You don't want to go to the gym, but when you go, you feel better about it. And you are a part of that community, and you're also plugged into Eric's house, and we're grateful for that. So where can people hear more from you? I mean,
Well, you guys can follow me, on Instagram,
Yeah.
social media, all that stuff. It's not about me today. It's at Billy Harfosh if you want to. But most importantly, follow Eric's house, get involved with Eric's house. You're the people that are doing the real work. So keep it up.
Well, we're grateful. That's Billy Harfosh from iHeartRadio. And Billy, we're really grateful for you being here today. Thank you so much for joining us.